My fiancée arrived at the restaurant with another man, not knowing I'd reserved the private room to propose in front of her parents. I was adjusting the roses in the center of the table when I saw them through the frosted glass partition. My girlfriend, Melissa, was walking through the main dining room with a man who wasn't me. He had his hand on the small of her back, that intimate gesture of guidance and possession, and she was laughing at something he'd said. Through the decorative glass, I could only see their silhouettes, but I recognized her shape immediately, the way she moved, the tilt of her head when she was genuinely amused. My hands went completely still on the rose stems. Her parents, Frank and Donna, were sitting across from me in the private dining room I'd reserved for $800, champagne chilling in the ice bucket, the ring box a hard weight in my jacket pocket. We were supposed to be surprising Melissa with a family dinner where I'd ask her to marry me in front of the people who raised her. Instead, I was watching her arrive with another man while her father checked his watch and her mother touched up her lipstick, both of them unaware that their daughter was about to walk into a disaster. I'd been planning this proposal for 3 months, coordinating schedules across 2 states to get everyone together on the same night. Melissa and I had been together for 2 years, living together for the past 8 months in a condo downtown that we'd furnished piece by piece from estate sales and IKEA. She was a marketing coordinator for a pharmaceutical company. I was a software engineer at a mid-sized tech firm, and we had the kind of stable, comfortable relationship that everyone told us was ready for the next step. Her parents lived in Vermont, a 6-hour drive away, and visits required planning around holidays and vacation time. When I'd called Frank 3 months ago to ask for his blessing to propose, he'd been enthusiastic and immediately started coordinating with Donna about when they could travel down for the big moment. We'd settled on tonight, a Friday in early October, at Meridian, an upscale restaurant known for romantic proposals and anniversary celebrations. The plan was simple. I told Melissa we were meeting my colleague and his wife for dinner at Meridian. She'd been mildly annoyed about having to dress up for a work dinner on a Friday night, but had agreed. What she didn't know was that there was no colleague's wife, just her parents who'd driven down this afternoon and checked into a hotel. I'd reserved the private dining room, arranged for a photographer to capture the moment, ordered Melissa's favorite wine and her mother's preferred appetizers. At 7:15, I'd positioned myself by the window, pretending to look for my fictional colleague while actually watching the parking lot. When I saw Melissa's silver Mazda pull in at exactly 7:23, my heart had started racing with anticipation and nerves. Then the passenger door opened and a man got out. Not me. Someone else. From my vantage point in the private room, I watched Melissa and this man approach the host stand. She was wearing the black dress I'd complimented that morning when she'd asked what the dress code was. He was in slacks and a button-down, his hand still on her back. The host checked something on his tablet, gestured toward the back of the restaurant, and started leading them in our direction. My mind raced through possibilities. Maybe this was her coworker and his car had broken down and she'd given him a ride. Maybe they'd run into each other in the parking lot and he was just walking in at the same time. Maybe there was some completely innocent explanation that would make sense in the next 30 seconds. Frank looked up from his phone and said, "Is that Melissa coming?" I said I thought so, but I couldn't quite see through the glass. Donna said, "Oh, how exciting. She has no idea we're here." The door to the private room opened, and Melissa stepped in with the man close behind her. Her expression went through several transformations in rapid succession. Confusion at seeing her parents, shock at the romantic setup, dawning horror as she realized what this dinner was supposed to be. The man behind her stopped short, clearly not expecting to walk into a private family gathering. There was a frozen moment where nobody spoke. Then Frank stood up, his face moving from excited to puzzled, and said, "Melissa? What's going on? Who is this?" Melissa's face had gone completely white. She said, "Dad? Mom? What are you doing here?" Donna stood up too and said, "We came to surprise you. We've been planning this for months." Then she looked at the man and said, "I'm sorry. Who are you?" The man extended his hand awkwardly and said, "Jordan Stevens. I work with Melissa. She told me we were meeting clients for dinner." There was clearly some confusion. I watched this unfold from my position by the table, still holding the champagne bottle I'd been about to open. Melissa looked at me, and I saw genuine panic in her eyes. She said, "This isn't what it looks like. Jordan and I were supposed to be meeting the Dixon Pharma account team. I thought that's what tonight was. I must have gotten the plans mixed up." Her voice was high and strained, the voice she used when lying about small things like whether she'd already eaten dinner or if she'd remembered to pay a bill. Jordan looked between all of us and said, "I'm very sorry for intruding on what seems to be a family event. I'll just go." Frank said, "Hold on a minute. Let's all sit down and figure out what's happening here." His voice had the authoritative tone of a man used to getting answers, the tone that had probably terrified Melissa's teenage boyfriends and college friends who'd tried to lie to him. We all sat, the intimate party of 4 I'd planned now an uncomfortable 6. The photographer I'd hired was hidden in the corner by the curtain, still on standby, capturing what was supposed to be a joyful proposal and was instead turning into an interrogation. I asked Melissa directly, "Why did you think we were meeting Dixon Pharma tonight? I told you this morning we were having dinner with my colleague Steve and his wife." Melissa's eyes darted to Jordan and then back to me. She said, "I had 2 dinners on my calendar. I must have gotten confused about which was tonight." I thought the Dixon meeting was this evening and your work thing was tomorrow. Simple mix-up. Jordan shifted uncomfortably and said, to be clear, Melissa scheduled this Dixon dinner yesterday. She sent me a calendar invite for 7:30 at Meridian with a note that said the account team would meet us here. Frank leaned forward and said, Melissa, why would you schedule a work dinner on the same night you already had plans? That doesn't make sense. Melissa was scrambling now, her story fragmenting under questioning. She said, I didn't realize I had plans. I thought tonight was free. I must have double-booked myself by accident. These things happen. Donna, who'd been quiet, finally spoke. She said, Sweetheart, look at me. Are you having an affair with this man? The question dropped into the room like a grenade. Melissa's face flushed deep red and she said, What? No. Mom, Jesus, no. Jordan is a colleague. We work together. That's all. Jordan looked deeply uncomfortable and said, I can confirm we work together. I'm the senior marketing director. Melissa reports to me. We have a professional relationship, but I should really go. This is clearly a private family matter. I said, How long have you been working together? Jordan said, About 4 months. She transferred to my team in June. I said, And in those 4 months, how many times have you two had dinner together outside of office hours? Jordan hesitated, clearly realizing he was walking into a minefield. He said, I don't keep track. A few times. Team building, strategy sessions, that sort of thing. Melissa said, Can we please not do this here? Can we talk about this at home privately? Frank said, No. We came all the way from Vermont for tonight. Whatever is happening, it's happening now in front of all of us. I pulled out my phone and opened the calendar app, turned it to show Melissa. I said, Here's the event I created 3 weeks ago for tonight. Friday dinner at Meridian with Steve and his wife at 7:30. You confirmed it. You asked me about dress code this morning. There's no Dixon meeting on your shared calendar with me. Want to explain that? Melissa stared at the screen, and I watched her realize she'd been caught in a direct lie. She said, I keep a separate work calendar. The Dixon meeting was on that one. I didn't sync it to our shared calendar because it was work stuff. I turned to Jordan and said, Can you show me the calendar invite Melissa sent you for tonight? Jordan looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. He said, I don't think that's appropriate. This is between you and Melissa. I said, You're here. You're part of this now. Show me the invite. Jordan reluctantly pulled out his phone and navigated to his calendar. He showed me the entry. Dinner with Dixon account team, 7:30, Meridian. Sent by Melissa yesterday at 3:15 p.m. I screenshot it with my phone before Jordan could pull it away. Then I said to Melissa, You sent this yesterday. After I'd already told you multiple times this week, we had plans tonight. You deliberately scheduled a dinner with Jordan and told him it was a client meeting. Why? Melissa's composure cracked completely. She said, I need some air. I need to step outside. Frank said, Sit down. You owe everyone here an explanation. Donna reached across the table and took Melissa's hand. She said gently, Honey, whatever is going on, you can tell us. We love you. We're here to support you. But you need to be honest. Melissa's eyes filled with tears and she said, There's nothing going on. Jordan and I are friends. Good friends. We spend time together because we enjoy each other's company. But it's not romantic. It's not an affair. I still love him, she gestured at me. And I want to be with him. This is all just a misunderstanding. Jordan cleared his throat and said, Melissa, maybe you should tell them the truth. Melissa's head snapped toward him and she said, Jordan, don't. He said, I can't be part of lying to your family. These people deserve to know. Melissa said, There's nothing to tell. Please just go. Jordan looked at Frank and Donna and said, Melissa and I have been seeing each other romantically for about 2 months. We've kept it quiet because we work together and she was in a relationship. I didn't know about tonight or about any of this. I'm sorry. If you are enjoying this story already, please subscribe to see more stories like this. The silence that followed was deafening. Melissa made a choking sound and said, That's not true. He's lying. He's had feelings for me and I've rejected them, and now he's trying to make trouble. Jordan, tell them you're lying. Jordan shook his head and said, I'm not lying. I have text messages, photos, hotel receipts. I thought you were going to end things with him. He nodded at me, and that we'd go public with our relationship. Obviously, I was wrong about what was happening here. Frank stood up, his face red with fury. He said, Get out. Both of you get out of my sight. Melissa started crying and said, Daddy, please, let me explain. Frank said, There's nothing to explain. You cheated on a man who loves you enough to fly your parents down here for a proposal. You lied to everyone in this room. Get out before I say something I'll regret. Melissa looked at me with desperate, pleading eyes. She said, Please, let me talk to you alone. Let me explain everything. There's context you don't understand. I said, What context makes any of this okay? You've been having an affair for 2 months. You lied to me every day for 2 months. You lied tonight to bring him here while your parents and I were planning to celebrate our engagement. What possible context excuse is that? Melissa said, I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted. Jordan pursued me aggressively, and I was flattered and I made mistakes, but I never stopped loving you. I was going to end things with him this week. Tonight was supposed to be a final conversation with him before I committed fully to you. I said, so you were going to break up with him at a dinner you told him was a client meeting? Melissa said, I didn't know how else to do it. I needed a public place. I needed it to be final. Jordan laughed, a bitter sound. He said, that's absolute nonsense. You told me this morning you were falling in love with me. You said you were going to end things with him this weekend and move out. You said we could start being public about us by the end of the month. Melissa's face went from pale to gray. She said, I didn't say that. You're twisting my words. Jordan pulled out his phone again and said, do you want me to read the text out loud? Because I will. Melissa lunged for his phone, but he pulled it back. Frank said, read them. I want to hear them. Jordan started reading. This morning at 9:42 a.m., Melissa texts, I can't wait to be done hiding us. I'm going to talk to him this weekend and then we can finally be together for real. I text back, are you sure you're ready? She responds, I've never been more sure of anything. Being with you feels right in a way that nothing else has. I think I'm falling for you. Donna made a sound like she'd been punched. Melissa was sobbing now, her mascara running down her face. She said, those texts don't mean what you think they mean. I was caught up in the moment. I didn't mean them literally. Jordan said, you meant them when you said them. You meant them when we were together in my bed 2 nights ago. You meant them when you kissed me goodbye this morning and told me tonight would be special. Melissa shouted, stop! Stop talking! You're ruining everything! I said, he's not ruining anything. You already did that. The ring in my pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. All those months of planning, saving, coordinating, hoping, destroyed in less than 15 minutes by text messages and hotel receipts and a co-worker's guilty conscience. Frank said to Jordan, do you have proof of this affair? Photos, receipts, more messages? Jordan said, yes, extensive documentation. We've been to hotels 5 times, restaurants dozens of times. We've exchanged hundreds of texts and photos. I can provide all of it if needed. Frank said, send it to me. Jordan looked uncertain and said, I'm not sure that's appropriate. Frank said, my daughter destroyed her relationship and humiliated this young man who was trying to propose to her. The least she deserves is for the truth to be fully documented. Send me everything. Jordan looked at Melissa, who was shaking her head frantically, then made a decision. He said, give me your email. I'll send you a file tonight. Frank recited his email address, and Jordan typed it into his phone. Then Jordan stood up and said, I'm truly sorry for my part in this. I should have insisted Melissa be honest about her situation before getting involved. That was wrong. I apologize to you. He looked at me, and to her parents. I'll see myself out. After Jordan left, the 4 of us sat in silence. The champagne had gone warm. The roses were wilting under the heat lamps. The photographer had probably captured more than enough material for whatever purpose this evening would serve now. Melissa was still crying, her whole body shaking with sobs. Donna looked devastated, her carefully applied makeup streaked with tears. Frank looked like he wanted to put his fist through the wall. And I felt nothing, completely numb. The woman I'd been planning to spend my life with had been lying to me for months, sleeping with her boss, planning to leave me, all while I coordinated with her parents and picked out rings and reserved private dining rooms. I said, I need to know how long you've actually been involved with him, not the timeline he gave. Your timeline. Melissa said through tears. 2 months, like he said. It started at a conference in August. We were both drinking and things happened and then it kept happening. I said, did you love me at all during those 2 months? Or was I just the safe option while you figured out if Jordan was better? Melissa said, I loved you. I do love you. It's complicated. I can love 2 people at once. That's what made this so hard. I said, that's not how commitment works. That's not how any of this works. You don't get to test drive a new relationship while keeping the old one running in case the new one doesn't work out. Melissa said, I know. I know it was wrong. I'm a terrible person. But I can fix this. We can fix this. We can go to counseling and work through this. I'll never talk to Jordan again. I'll quit my job if I have to. Please don't give up on us. Frank said, Melissa, stop. You're embarrassing yourself. You cheated. You lied. You got caught. Accept the consequences with some dignity. Melissa turned on her father and said, you're supposed to be on my side. You're supposed to support me. Frank said, I'm on the side of decency and honesty. Right now, that's his side, not yours. I stood up and said, I'm leaving. I need to think. I need space. Melissa grabbed my hand and said, don't leave. Please don't leave. Stay and let's talk this through. I pulled my hand away and said, there's nothing to talk through. You made your choices. Now, I have to make mine. I walked out of the private dining room, through the main restaurant where other couples were enjoying romantic dinners without drama, and out to the parking lot where my car sat alone in the corner. I sat in the driver's seat and just breathed for a few minutes, trying to process what had just happened. My phone buzzed. A text from Frank. I'm sorry, son. You deserved better than this. Another buzz, this time from Donna. Please know we had no idea. We're heartbroken for you. Another buzz from Melissa. Please come back. We need to talk. I'll do anything to fix this. I turned my phone off and drove home. The condo was exactly as I'd left it that morning. Melissa's coffee cup in the sink, her jacket on the chair, our shared life in every corner. I went to the bedroom and started packing a bag. I needed to stay somewhere else tonight. Couldn't be here when she got home. Couldn't face more crying and pleading and promises. I called my best friend Adrian, a divorce attorney, which seemed darkly appropriate for the situation. He answered on the second ring and said, "What's wrong?" I never call this late unless there's a crisis. I gave him the abbreviated version of the evening. He was silent for a moment, then said, "Jesus. I'm sorry. That's brutal. Do you need a place to stay?" I said yes, and he said he'd make up the guest room. Then he said, "Listen, I know you're not married, so divorce doesn't apply, but you need to think about protecting yourself. Do you own that condo together? Is your name on the lease? Are there shared assets?" I said the condo was a rental, both our names on the lease. We'd split the deposit and furniture costs. Adrian said, "You need to document everything. Take photos of the condo tonight, keep receipts for anything you've paid for, and start separating your finances immediately. If she's been having an affair, she may have been spending shared money on it. You need to know what you're dealing with." I hadn't even thought about the financial aspect. I logged into our joint checking account while Adrian waited on the phone. The account we used for shared expenses like rent and utilities. There were charges I didn't recognize. Hotel stays at the Riverside Inn on dates I'd been traveling for work. Restaurant charges at places Melissa had told me she'd been having girls' nights. Spa charges and shopping charges that seemed excessive even for Melissa's usual spending. I started screenshotting everything. Adrian said, "Get access to credit card statements too. If she's been hiding expenses, you need documentation." I spent the next hour documenting financial records while packing. I found credit card statements showing thousands of dollars in charges over the past 2 months. Hotels, dinners, gifts. She'd been financing an entire second relationship on money I'd thought was going toward our shared life. My phone, which I'd turned back on, was blowing up with texts from Melissa. 37 messages ranging from apologetic to angry to desperate. I didn't read most of them. I just packed my essentials and left. When I got to Adrian's house at 11 p.m., he had coffee brewing and the guest room ready. He said, "I sent you the name of a therapist, Dr. Helen Carver. She specializes in relationship trauma and infidelity. You should call her tomorrow. This is going to mess with your head in ways you don't expect." I thanked him, and we talked until 2 in the morning, Adrian helping me think through practical next steps, separating finances, getting my name off the lease, retrieving my belongings from the condo, deciding whether to pursue any legal action for the misused joint funds. Saturday morning, I woke to more texts from Melissa and missed calls from her parents. Frank had sent me an email with the subject line, "Documentation from Jordan." I opened it with my stomach churning. Jordan had been thorough. There were screenshots of hundreds of text messages between him and Melissa, ranging from flirtatious to explicitly sexual. There were photos of them together at restaurants, at hotels, in what looked like Jordan's apartment. There were receipts for hotel rooms, dinners, gifts. There was even a photo of Melissa wearing a necklace I didn't recognize with a note from Jordan that said, "You looked beautiful wearing this last night." The evidence painted a picture of a full relationship, not just a 2-month affair, but something Melissa had invested time, emotion, and apparently a lot of our shared money into. I forwarded everything to Adrian, who reviewed it with a professional eye. He said, "This is bad. She's been using joint funds to finance the affair, which is legally problematic. You could potentially sue her for misappropriation of funds, though whether it's worth the cost and hassle is debatable. More importantly, you have clear documentation that she's been deceptive and unfaithful. If she tries to claim you abandoned the relationship or failed in some way, you have proof otherwise." I asked what I should do next. Adrian said, "First, send her a formal email stating you're terminating the relationship and requiring her to make arrangements to buy you out of shared property or arrange for you to buy her out. Second, close the joint checking account and open individual accounts. Third, document everything related to the apartment. What you paid for, what she paid for, what's jointly owned. Fourth, cut off communication except in writing for the record. No phone calls, no in-person meetings where things can be said without documentation." Sunday morning, Melissa showed up at Adrian's house. I don't know how she found me, but she was standing on the front porch crying when Adrian opened the door. He immediately said, "You need to leave. This is my home, and you're not welcome here." Melissa said, "I need to talk to him. Please. Just 5 minutes." Adrian said, "He doesn't want to talk to you. All communication should be in writing going forward." Melissa pushed past Adrian and into the house, which was a mistake because Adrian immediately called the police. She found me in the kitchen and said, "Please, you have to listen to me. I made terrible mistakes, but I love you and I want to fix this. We can get past this if you just give me a chance." I said, "Get out. You've lied to me for months. You've stolen from our joint account to fund your affair. You've destroyed any trust I had in you. There's nothing to fix." Melissa said, "I'll pay back every penny. I'll go to counseling. I'll do whatever it takes. If this story keeps your interest, please subscribe to get more stories like this." The police arrived 10 minutes later. 2 officers, one older and clearly experienced, Officer Daniel Torres, with probably 25 years on the force based on his demeanor, and a younger female officer, Officer Amy Nguyen. Adrian explained the situation. that Melissa and I had ended our relationship. She'd shown up uninvited at his home, refused to leave when asked, and we wanted her removed. Melissa tried to explain to the officers that we were just having a misunderstanding, that she needed to talk to me, that this was all being blown out of proportion. Officer Torres said, "Ma'am, you're at a private residence and you've been asked to leave. If you don't leave voluntarily, we'll have to remove you and possibly charge you with trespassing." Melissa finally left, but not before shouting at me, "You're going to regret this. We had something real, and you're throwing it away because you can't forgive one mistake." Monday morning, I called Dr. Helen Carver, the therapist Adrian had recommended. Her practice specialized in trauma recovery, and she had a cancellation for that afternoon. I went to her office, a quiet space with comfortable chairs and soft lighting, and told her everything. She listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes. When I finished, she said, "What you're experiencing is a form of betrayal trauma. The person you trusted most has systematically deceived you, and you witnessed that deception exposed in a particularly painful and public way. That's going to affect how you trust people going forward, how you view relationships, possibly how you view yourself. We're going to work on processing those feelings and rebuilding your sense of safety and agency." Over the next few weeks, I saw Dr. Carver twice a week, working through the anger, hurt, and humiliation of what had happened. Meanwhile, the practical aspects of separating my life from Melissa's continued. I hired a lawyer, Stephen Blackwell, who specialized in cohabitation disputes and property division for unmarried couples. Stephen reviewed all the documentation, the lease, the receipts, the joint account statements, the evidence of Melissa's affair, and financial misappropriation. He said, "You have a strong case for recovering the money she spent on the affair from joint funds. We can send a demand letter requiring reimbursement, or we can file a civil suit. Your choice." I asked what he recommended. He said, "The demand letter first. Give her a chance to make this right without court involvement. If she refuses, then we escalate." We sent the demand letter requiring Melissa to reimburse me for half of the funds she'd spent from the joint account on her affair, approximately $4,200 plus my half of shared property we needed to divide. Melissa's response came through her own attorney, a woman named Patricia Donnelly, who seemed to specialize in making bad situations worse. The response letter claimed that Melissa had no obligation to reimburse me for money spent from a joint account she had equal access to, that the relationship ending was mutual and she deserved half of all shared property, and that my refusal to communicate or attempt reconciliation showed I had abandoned the relationship. Stephen read the response and said, "This is standard posturing. She's going to fight because she doesn't want to admit fault or face financial consequences." We proceed with the civil suit. Over the next 2 months, we built a comprehensive case showing Melissa's deception, the misappropriation of joint funds, and my good faith efforts to end the relationship appropriately and divide assets fairly. The case went to mediation before it would have gone to trial. We sat in a conference room, me, Stephen, Melissa, Patricia Donnelly, and a mediator named Robert Hayes, who'd been practicing family and civil mediation for 30 years. Robert reviewed both sides' documentation, asked clarifying questions, and then said, "Here's what I see. The plaintiff has extensive documentation showing the defendant used joint funds to finance an extramarital affair. The defendant has no real defense against that claim except that the funds were technically accessible to both parties. The law isn't on your side here, Ms. Donnelly. Your client needs to reimburse the plaintiff and negotiate a fair split of shared assets." Patricia tried to argue that Melissa's financial situation didn't allow for immediate reimbursement. Stephen countered with evidence of Melissa's salary and employment, showing she could absolutely afford it. After 3 hours of negotiation, we reached a settlement. Melissa would reimburse me $4,200 within 60 days. We would split shared furniture and property, with me getting slightly more to offset the lower reimbursement amount, and she would cover the cost of breaking the lease early since she wanted to stay in the condo and couldn't afford it alone. In return, I agreed not to pursue additional damages or legal action related to the affair. We signed the settlement agreement, and I walked out of that mediation room feeling something like closure. Not peace exactly, but the sense that a painful chapter was finally ending. Melissa tried to approach me in the parking lot, but Stephen intercepted and reminded her that all communication should go through attorneys per the settlement agreement. I got in my car and drove away without looking back. 3 months after the disastrous proposal dinner, Frank called me. He said, "I wanted to check in on you and also let you know what's happened with Melissa." I said I appreciated the call but wasn't sure I wanted to know about Melissa. He said, "I think you should hear this. Melissa and Jordan's relationship imploded about 6 weeks ago. Apparently he was also seeing someone else the whole time, another woman from work. Melissa found out and was devastated. She's been trying to contact you to apologize and see if there's any chance of reconciliation. I wanted to warn you in case she manages to reach you." I thanked Frank and said there was absolutely no chance of reconciliation, that I'd moved on and was building a new life. Frank said, "Good. You deserve better. Donna and I have been feeling terrible about what happened. We raised her better than that. I don't know where we went wrong." I told Frank he hadn't gone wrong, that sometimes people make bad choices regardless of how they were raised, and that I didn't hold him or Donna responsible for Melissa's actions. We talked for a while longer, and Frank mentioned they'd been disappointed in Melissa in other ways recently. She'd been fired from her job for violating company ethics policies regarding workplace relationships, was struggling financially, had isolated herself from family and friends. I felt a twinge of sympathy, but mostly just relief that it wasn't my problem anymore. Frank said, "If you ever need anything, a reference for a job, help with something, or you're just in Vermont and want to stop by, you're always welcome. You were almost our son-in-law, and we still think of you fondly." It was one of the kindest things anyone had said to me during the whole ordeal. 6 months after everything fell apart, I was doing genuinely well. I'd moved into a new apartment, gotten a promotion at work, made new friends through a recreational soccer league, and was casually dating someone I'd met at a coffee shop. Dr. Carver and I had wrapped up therapy with her assessment that I'd processed the trauma healthily and was ready to build new relationships from a place of strength rather than fear. Adrian and I had started a tradition of monthly dinners where we'd catch up and he'd share his latest legal war stories. Life had settled into a new normal that felt stable and hopeful. Then I got a message on LinkedIn from Jordan. He said, "I know this is unexpected, and you have no reason to hear me out, but I wanted to apologize properly for my role in what happened. I was selfish and dishonest, and I hurt you badly. I've done a lot of therapy and self-reflection since then. I wanted you to know I'm genuinely sorry." I thought about not responding, but ultimately decided I wanted closure on that front too. I wrote back, "I appreciate the apology. What you and Melissa did was hurtful, but I've moved past it. I hope you've learned from the experience and treat future relationships with more integrity." He responded, "I have. I'm actually engaged now to someone I met after things with Melissa ended. I've been completely honest with her about my past mistakes. I'm trying to be a better person." I wished him well and left it at that. Later I thought about how strange it was that Jordan was engaged while I was starting over, that he'd moved on quickly while I'd had to rebuild from scratch. But then I realized I didn't actually envy him. I'd rather be single and honest than engaged and carrying the weight of knowing I'd built a relationship on someone else's suffering. A year after the disaster at Meridian, I was having dinner with my girlfriend Rachel at a different restaurant when I saw Melissa across the room. She was alone, looking at her phone, clearly waiting for someone. Our eyes met, and she looked startled, then sad, then resigned. She got up and came over to our table. She said, "I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to say I'm glad you're happy. You look good." I introduced her briefly to Rachel and said thank you. Melissa said, "I've wanted to apologize to you properly for a long time. I was selfish and cruel, and I destroyed something good because I was too immature to appreciate it. I'm sorry." I accepted the apology, and she went back to her table. Rachel asked who that was, and I gave her the short version of the story. Rachel said, "Wow, that must have been awful." I said it was at the time, but it led me here, to this moment with her, so I was grateful for how things had worked out. The ring I'd bought for Melissa, the one that sat in my pocket that horrible night at Meridian, had been returned to the jeweler for a full refund within the 30-day return window. I'd used that money to take a solo trip to Iceland, something I'd always wanted to do but Melissa had never been interested in. I'd hiked glaciers, seen the northern lights, stayed in remote cabins, and spent time figuring out who I was outside of that relationship. It was one of the best decisions I'd made. When I got engaged to Rachel 2 years later, I proposed at a small gathering of close friends and family at our apartment. Nothing elaborate or performative, just intimate and honest. We didn't need grand gestures or private dining rooms. We just needed each other, and the certainty that we were choosing each other fully and honestly. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if Jordan hadn't felt guilty, if he'd kept the secret, if Melissa had successfully juggled both relationships long enough to let me propose. I might have married her, might have built a life on a foundation of lies that would have eventually collapsed anyway, but with much higher stakes, shared property, possibly kids, years of investment. The disaster at Meridian, as painful as it was, saved me from a much bigger disaster. It exposed the truth before I'd committed legally and permanently to someone who wasn't capable of the loyalty and honesty that marriage requires. In that sense, it was a gift. A horrible, painful, public gift, but a gift nonetheless. The worst moment of my romantic life ended up being the moment that redirected me towards something real and lasting. And I'll take that outcome over a beautiful proposal hiding an ugly truth any day. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.